in your life. God has things that He wants to do in your life. Some of you have been through setbacks. You've been through a struggle, a hardship. But it's important that you don't stay the same. I remember this missionary movie. It was called China Cry. It was a missionary love story, kind of. Took place in around the Second World War. I believe it was right after. It took place in China. This Chinese girl was newly married, or she fell in love in college and they got married. Soon she became pregnant, and that's when the communist Chinese took over the land, and they began to call in the teachers, put them in re-education camps. Their goal was to change things around, make everyone a certain class. There was only one class. Everyone got paid the same. Her dad was a professor in this university. He finally ended up dying. They denied him medicine. But I'll get to the point. She was put in a labor camp. She was pregnant. Her husband somehow made it to Hong Kong. Hong Kong was free at the time. Let's not go there. But her husband went there and sent her nylons back at one, and they found her with nylons. They said, "You can't have this." Everyone had to be common. And they were trying to rid society of things like this. Well, she wanted to escape to Hong Kong also and be free. China Cry. It was a movie where she was trying to escape and leave communist China. She went back regular. She was in this camp, this labor camp, and I remember it vividly, though it's an old movie, but it's applicable to start off this morning as we're talking about going back strong. I remember seeing this in blue. I lived in China. I wore those Gabs teaching. I taught in a university there. But I used to wear my Chairman Mao hat to try to fit in. But I remember she was pregnant. She would always go back shuffling. She was cutting stone, believe it or not. Dirty, haven't bathed in a while. You could tell she was just barely making it. But she went to the office, the Foreign Affairs office there, and was always going there every day, for they did believe that you had rights, but many times they didn't practice them. Stay with me for a moment. So she would go there every day, bring her paperwork, and the military person, "Don't come back here till you got it all together." And every time she came back, they said, "No, you didn't do this. You didn't do this," and kind of making it tough on her. Finally, at the end of the story, she got the exit permit. And they said, "We know you're not going to come back. We know that you're just trying to leave. You're not going to come back." But every time she went back a little stronger and had her paperwork in order. God is doing something in your life, my brother, my sister. When we look here in Galatians, Paul went back to Jerusalem, but he went back stronger. He went back, and it says 14 years later that he went back. I don't know what God is doing in your life, but God wants you to go back stronger. What does going back stronger look like for you in your life? Johnny D. Then after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem. This time with Barnabas. I took Titus along also. I went in response to a revelation and meeting privately with these esteemed as leaders, with those esteemed as leaders. I presented to them the gospel that I preached among the Gentiles. I wanted to be sure I was not running and not been running my race in vain. Paul got knocked off his horse right before this. He was called. He was called into ministry. He was an enemy of the people of God. He was knocked off his horse, a bright light. God called him. It says here that 14 years later, before that, he went to Jerusalem. This is a story about Paul going back to Jerusalem the second time. And I want to look at it in context of your life. What is God bringing you back to that you need to go back stronger to? Maybe something happened in your life and you feel weakened. Maybe something has gone on in your life and you feel like you're weaker than ever. You're farther, you're more distant than ever. It's hard to even fathom you making it. God wants you to go farther than where you're at today. I know it's hard for some of you to capture that because you're struggling today. But when I look at Paul's life, and this is just 2 verses, this is a story. And I've been mulling over this actually for several weeks. So I'm going to try to deliver it. And you maybe only will get 1 or 2 thoughts, but that's okay because God has a word for you. God wants you to go back to that thing that you left stronger. What does that look like for you? The first thing I see is it took time. I remember when the first church that we planted, we came out of Naperville, a large church, planted Calvary Chapel, was Calvary Temple at the time. And I remember trying to build our first church or buy our first church and remodel it. I went to the board meeting at Libertyville. And we had a contract for this building. I don't know how much it was, a long time ago. But I remember going there, and some of you know the story a little bit. I'll try to remember it. But I remember going there, and I only had like 2 sheets of paper, regular, to tell my plan. I only paid like $500. I think it was $250 or $500 a sheet. The person next to me had a sheet like this of his plans. Thinking, man, that must have cost a lot of money. We were small, 30 people in our church. And it was difficult. Maybe we took in $500 maybe a week, maybe, as far as offerings. But we were trying to find a home where we could pray and have regular services instead of not knowing every week. Well, I went there, and I'll be quick, and they turned me down. I didn't have an architect to go with me. That would have been extra. We didn't have the money. And they kind of laughed at me. I remember one guy saying to me, when you come back next time, come back ready, prepared. That wasn't a slap, but to me, I took it as one. But it was just, he was just doing his job, so I need to be kind. Because they had ensured that the community, that you were going to do everything right, that it would be aesthetically. I needed a rendering, a drawing, I needed landscaping plan, I needed all sorts of plans. I just wasn't prepared. I left that meeting embarrassed, humiliated, had to stand before the church like this, smaller. We're meeting at the Ozite building, I believe. It was like a factory. The Catholic Church, I believe, owned it. A carpet place. Meeting in one little off cubicle in the bottom floor. But I remember that I was humiliated. I remembered that I thought, man, I got to do better. How did this pastor do it? How did they do it? They got something going. Soon after, I started a donut shop. I said, I'm not going to be in this position again, because we come from a bakery background. Soon after that, we sold the donut shop and got $75,000. I knew how to do donuts. Then we bought something. I did a trailer. I remodeled a trailer. Did a car, and $5,000 here, $1,000 here. And I remember saying to myself, driving along one time, I'm saying this for you, not for me this morning, because some of you need to go back stronger. There's something that God has for you. There's something more that God wants you to do. But I remember driving one, and I think it was on 60 and Butterfield Road. And I stopped there. I said, Lord, help me somehow to gather 200,000 so that we can have enough money one day to do a church. I'm saying this for a reason. I remember going back. And we did a few churches before this. We lived in China. We lived in Hawaii. But I remember, I'll go fast forward. But I remember when we purchased this church, they told us there was like 20 churches at the time. Now it's a different day. Been through the housing crash. They said 20 churches tried to buy this, but many didn't have the money. They were asking permission before they had the money. I'm thinking, oh, I know how those days were. But I remember when we wrote a check for about $750,000, wrote it out in cash. And I remember then we paid for everything, and I was thinking, I didn't want to be in the same position that I had to work, and it didn't come now. I didn't win the lottery. We didn't win the lottery. It was one day at a time. It was trying this, failing, but working hard, this, doing this. So what does going back look like for you in your life? What does coming back stronger look like for you? Paul was going back to Jerusalem. Before this, he was ragtag. He just got saved. He didn't understand everything. He went to Jerusalem the first time, and he presented himself with Peter, and he was sheepish. He wasn't a good orator. He wasn't confident. He was confident before, but he got struck down by the Lord. And now he's rebuilding. He's getting back on his feet. He's learning the ropes all over again in his new calling. He went to Jerusalem the first time. This time, 14 years later, he goes back to Jerusalem again. But this time, he went back stronger. I'm telling you, you need to go back. The place you're going back, God's going to bring you back stronger, where you're more equipped. You're ready for the battle. You might have made some mistakes last time. You might have did it wrong last time. Maybe it was your fault. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was situations, circumstances. But this time it's different for you. This time it's a new day. What does going back stronger look like for Paul here? First of all, it says 14 years later. Here's what I want to say. It's going to take time. Going back, coming back stronger takes time. And that's where you can't get too overly impatient. You got to be willing to go day by day. We're in a time where we want it immediately, and I'm with you. And there is coming a time, because there isn't a point in time where it is about to happen for you. It is about to break open for you, because you've been in the trenches. You've been there. You know what it is to wait on the Lord, to cry yourself to sleep at night. You know what it is to hurt, to have pain. So you're 14 years, it might have been 14 days, 14 months, but you know what it is to wait. You know what it is to take time. It took time in Paul's life. I knew that it would take time. I remember talking to Pastor Schmidgo once. I was ready to give up, throwing the towel. And I said, hey, man, this thing ain't working. For you, it's easy to plant a church. I just don't have it. Don't have a good personality. Something's wrong with me. He said, listen, just take one step at a time and keep going. Take one step at a time. I remember those words like it was yesterday. And I haven't always done it right. You know that. But here's what I want to say. It's going to take time for you to get to where you need to be. As a matter of fact, God's preparing you. God's working in your life right now, and you don't even know it, maybe. But you've added to it by being here, by lifting your hands, by being anointed with oil, by praying, by confessing your sins before God. It's taken time. But line upon line, you're getting there. And you know what? I'm even believing by the end of the summer, some of you are going to have a breakthrough like you never knew was possible. But it just didn't happen. It's because God's been working in your life all along. Because God's been doing some things in your life. Oh, sure, we wrote out this check, and the church before that, we wrote out a check that was only $100,000. We got them down to $100,000. Still a church today. But it is one thing after another. Listen, the way it works is it's every day, a little at a time. 14 years later, then after 14 years, it took time. It's hard. Paul went through a lot. Don't underestimate the day of small beginnings when it takes time. Because when you're in the desert, like Moses was for 40 years, it wasn't a waste of time. God was doing something. God put Moses in the desert for 40 years. He stumbled, he stammered. But God was teaching him. God was being his God in a time of testing, trial. And God brought him out and showcased him at the right time. And he stood before Pharaoh. Let my people go. Some of you are about to stand before the world, and God's going to break open something for your life because you've been through it. It's taken time. You've been weathered. You know what I'm talking about. You've had dreams. You've aspirations. What does your going back look like for you? It takes time. The second quick thing, it was trying. He went up again to Jerusalem. First of all, coming back, and I had to do T's because I got to get through this in a way for you to understand it. I understand it, but that's okay. You got to understand it. That's where communication. Listen, it was trying. What do you mean by that? He had to try again. I went up again to Jerusalem. You know how many times that I usually fail at something before I get it right? Probably 1,001. I wish it wasn't that way. I usually have 1,000, maybe I'm exaggerating, 1,000 tries before one thing works. You know how many times we look for a facility like this? I probably looked at every building in Chicago area. No, not literally. Now I sound like that President Trump always saying, you know, I'm joking. When I say something big, for some reason, maybe I watch the news too much. I think, what am I talking about? Okay, 100 times. But I try. Listen, my brother, you got to keep trying. You gotta, I went up again. You got to try again. Oh, I left that place, that board meeting, that humiliated. I walked away with my little 2 sheets. Those 2 sheets that did end up building a church. And I found a guy that was a Christian that helped me through it all. God's going to give you someone and help you find your way around. When others were making fun, I just went over to Vernon Hills. And I found out I was celebrated. The church to this day is there thriving. What I'm saying is, so God's going to bring you. God's going to introduce you to someone. God's going to help you. This guy was an old Salvation Army guy, about ready to retire. So he didn't have anything into, he was just looking to do good. And he walked me through it all. We built it ourselves. Trying. It would be easy for you to give up. It would be easy for you. And I'm only giving these illustrations because my wife says, John, you got to be able to bring it home. I said, I'm tired of illustrations, Sue. You even told me that. So I'm just giving a few so you can understand it. But some of you have been through it and you're about ready to give up. Listen, maybe the next time you'll make it. That addiction, that thing that's held you back. Maybe the next time. Well, 14 years, it took time. What was he doing though? What was Paul doing this time? Was he just backslidden the whole 14 years? No. He went to Arabia for 3 years, him and God together. That really was fun. In the desert, him and God together. He went to Bible college, but it was a rough Bible college. Peter was with Jesus and disciples. Paul Paul did it a different way. It's okay for God to bring you a different way. You don't got to go the route as Peter, but that's good too. Paul came a different route. Everybody's story is different, and that's okay. Peter was walking with Jesus. He was, to be an apostle, you had to see Jesus face to face. That's the definition. But Paul really didn't. It was just a bright light. It was Jesus. But he was sent in Arabia. Some of you have been sent places you don't like. You got to go places, but God's been teaching you the whole time. God's been stripping you. And you don't like it, you didn't understand it. But you're being presented at the right time. You're about ready to go back stronger. When this lady finally went back, and the China Cry story, she went back about the 20th time, dirty, shuffling in, hair, about ready to give birth. And finally he couldn't deny it because she dotted her I's, crossed her T's, and got her exit permit. And today, family and successful in Hong Kong. But here's what I want to say. It 14 years, it took trying. Third thing, it took Titus. Where'd you get that? I got to stick with the T's. Sorry, my brother, my sister. I went up again to Jerusalem. What does going back stronger look like for you? What's your story going to look like? It's going to take time, I'm sorry. You think going to work every day isn't getting you everywhere. You think trying, raising your kid or praying, going to church isn't getting you everywhere. I got news for you. Yes, it's working. It's about ready to come to pass, and maybe it's important that you don't give up. Sure, you could walk away like me and think, oh, I'm humiliated, nothing's going to work, forget me. I could have been one of those pastors, but I said, no, I'm not. I talked to another senior pastor, gave me encouragement. We got to be in this together. I went up again. You got to keep trying. This time with Barnabas. What's the third? He went with Titus. Barnabas wasn't a B. He went with Barnabas and Titus. What does that mean? You got to go back stronger, more equipped. This time he was smarter. This time, you going back to that job, to that relationship, you going back to that thing, you're going back better. God's been training you. You're not going to get in the same trap as the enemy. You're not going to be brought down in the same way. Oh, you're going to have struggles. But you've been through it. You've been weathered. This time you know how to work your way. When we bought this, I remember they said, oh, you got to get permission first. You know what I did? Because I've been through now about a dozen of these municipal things. I've sat in the chairs, I studied, talked. I've done enough of them now. And I don't mean that by trying to say I was smart in a way. I don't mean that. So what I did is I went and bought the whole ordinance thing for the city of Arlington Heights. And I combed through one page at a time. And I found an exception that would win us the day. I knew that if I would have gone the regular route, they would have shut me down like the last 25 or 30 applicants. I don't know why. There's nothing fancy about this, but it's tough, the suburbs. Especially a meeting place. It takes a lot of money and it's regulations. One time, one thing they wanted me to do was going to cost us just $100,000 just for one thing, and I had pages of them. But I remember combing through that, and I found an exception. Praise God for the Catholics. The Catholics got that in there. I know for a fact. They were smart. They had some lawyer write it in the ordinance. That's my belief. That's why I'm good friends with the fathers around here, because I respect them. So I knew that I could write that check out and we're going to be okay. They came in here. I don't know why I'm telling the whole story. They came in and said, you can't meet here. And I said, why? They said, you didn't get permission. I said, yeah, I did. I have permission. Look at right here. Because we'll lock this place up. And I said, okay. You can lock me up. And I put my hands behind my back. My hands were bloody because I was doing all the work with another guy, Dane. We only had a handful of people. We were trying to get started again. Now I remember him calling and says, this guy's serious. This guy, he's called his boss because this guy's serious. Now we're good friends. This guy's serious. He ain't going to back down. You got to try again. You can't allow the attack of the enemy to run ripshot over you and you give up. Your future, it's too important. What God has for you is too important. I got to get going 25 after. To make a long story, I found another exclusion for a church. I found out there was 2 zoning ordinances for churches. We didn't qualify the first one, but we qualified for the second one. I knew that you had to be smarter and you had to go back trying it. This time he went back with Titus. He went back equipped. He had Barnabas on his side. He had Titus on his side. And he went back strong. This time, you know how you're going back? You know how you're going to get over this thing? Because you have Jesus standing with you. You're not going back alone. You got the power of the Holy Spirit. You're a different person. It's a different day. The enemy could throw it all at you, and the enemy's not going to win. Because God's got your back this time. You're going to beat this thing. And you got Barnabas on one side. It's hard for you to go back to the second time. Last time, Barnabas was leading Paul. This time, Paul is leading Barnabas. I don't know what your future has in store, but I do know this, that God's doing something deep in your life. And you can't look at the small things and say they're insignificant when you're only making $10 an hour, when you're only doing a little bit, when things are rough. You can't look at it because God sees the big picture. Because God sees the totality and He's working in the small thing. When I was making a little, it was just getting me closer to the place, the destiny that I needed to be at. God's doing it in your life, my brother, my sister. This time with I like this. That's why I've been hooked on this for a few weeks now. This time, I like stories like this. This time I'm taking Barnabas and Titus, because that's a T. You're not going back ill-equipped this time. You're like her. You're going back. You're strong. You know what she kept on saying to the guard? God's put this in my heart, and I'm going to go back. God promised me that I'm going to escape to Hong Kong. He's telling that to the communist Chinese soldier. Some of you, the enemy's trying to talk you out of it. God's here this morning to talk you back into it. You got a dream. You got a vision. It's going to take time. It's going to take work. I wish it was any different. We're getting older. We don't like that. But that's why you keep the train going and make it gets easier all the time. I went up again. You got to keep trying. I went up again. It's the connotation is you got to do it again. You got to try again. The connotation with Barnabas. This time with Barnabas. This time I'm going back and I got enough in the checking account. I know that it could work. So that's why you don't blow off those years in the desert. You know what God said to the people of God in the desert? You know what God said to them when He put them in Babylon? Yes, God put them in Babylon. Do you think God isn't in control of His people? God put the people of God in Babylon. We forget to say that. He allowed it to be. But you know what He said? Because I'm not doing this to punishing you. Because when you're here, when you're in Babylon, prosper. You're going to be there 70 years. But I want you to marry. I want you to buy and sell. I want you to be strong. So like the Israelites coming out of Egypt, they came out they came out strong. And God gave them the gold, everything that they were laboring for. God is never out to punish you. God's always out to help you. God's not out to correct you. No, God's out to bless you. So even your times of your times of wandering, your desert experiences, they're times where God wants you to learn and to benefit from. I remember pastoring church for 4 years. I was going to go there after China for 3 months. Superintendent sent me there. He says, go to this church. Nobody wants a pastor there. I saw why after I got there. They kick them out every 3 months. I said, oh, thank you. But But I went there and ended up staying 4 years. You know why I stayed 4 years? Just because they tried to get rid of me. Just like the other guys. And they said, go back to Chicago where you came from. And it was Southern Illinois. I go, woo. Woo. The $200 we're paying you, we're not even going to pay you that anymore. I go, woo. I said, keep your check. I don't want it. You know what we did? We started remodeling everything. The whole church out of our money. And you know what? We broke the back. And to this day, that church is the largest church in the city. Here's what I want to say. I don't know. Keep trying. Keep going after it. Keep running. As long as you got breath. Don't allow the enemy to define you. You define your life in Christ Jesus. It's going to be because you and God. If you think you're going to do this thing on your own, you got another thing coming. Sure, I made money. Sure, we wrote out the check. But it was all God 7 days a week. So put God first. He'll take you places that you never dreamed were possible. Oh, Titus. It took Titus. It's going to take other people for you to capture, you to get there. You got to go back with other people. You got to be stronger. I'm glad we're together. You know what? We're a good church. We're one of the few churches meeting, you know. We're a good church. You're a powerhouse, my brother. You're a powerhouse. You are. You're a powerhouse. We're church well known all throughout. There's not a time we almost can't go to a hair where someone comes up to us. Are you that church? What I'm saying is God's using you. We're a family. I'm standing with you. I was up most of the night last night praying and interceding for you. Binding the enemy, believing for your kids, believing for your wives or your husbands, believing for grandchildren you don't even have yet. I got to get going. Give me 2 minutes and I'm done. This time with Barnabas. And Titus also. God's going to give you some extra. Now you're moving back into God's realm. My last thing. Okay, I've already said it. It took testings. What does that look like, Pastor? Took testings. I went in response to a revelation. And meeting privately with those esteemed leaders, he got a little smarter. It's good to be smart. I knew when I went in the meeting there that I had my ducks in a row. Oh, I didn't blow them out of the water with two. No, I was careful. To a point. I presented to them the gospel. Listen, I went in response to the revelation. What is that testing? Here's what happened to Paul's life. Before this, he was in 16 years or 14 years, plus maybe a couple others in ministry. And you know what? He was thrown out of town one time. He was arrested, beaten. The jailers, this all took place. He was thrown out. He was snickered. He didn't have much of a following. It wasn't until the back half of his life where God began to break things open. That's a word to you. The back half from here on forward is going to be good for you. God's going to do some things